What's your name?
My name is Otto.
Otto, you're going to have a minute to pitch your business and get some feedback. You feeling ready?
I'm ready.
What are you building?
So midpage is a case law search engine. So think about it. How many cases get filed in courts every year? It's around 65 million. And so lawyers spend around a third of their time just researching and reading those cases. Now, the problem is that, of course, with AI, we can build a very different way to navigate that same data. But the only companies that have this case law data are a centuries-old duopoly. And so we wanted to build a new way of research and drafting, and first had to create this immense case law data set. Then we managed, about last month to get to a point where we have more case law data than anybody else in that space, and therefore can build a new way to do research, which allows lawyers to find cases by searching and filtering and prompting over thousands of cases at once. And we now have 100 paying customers and are growing 30% month on month. And with this, teams can start a single
That's
lawyer.
a minute. Don't worry. I'm going to continue. Couple quick hits of feedback before I forget them. 30% month over month over 100 paying customers is not enough of a number. I wouldn't mention that in almost any context unless
Depends
you're
on how much they're paying.
Are they paying much?
$100 per month per seat.
I would still, you're at the stage where that 30% month over month doesn't mean enough quite yet. I think if you're in conversation with an investor second meeting, or they ask you in a meeting, it makes sense. But don't proactively offer numbers that might not make sense without more context of we're still only a few months in, or here's how hard it is to sell. There might be reasons that this is an impressive number, but I don't hear it as impressive off the bat. The other thing is maybe a bigger piece of feedback that I'll give, but we don't need to get into it quite yet unless Ihar agrees. The thing that I'm missing from this is world building. I think I get a lot of it because I have a friend, again, I actually mentioned him the other pitch, who's building in the legal tech space with AI. And so I've learned a lot about, and I'm applying that imagination to case law and what exactly the problems are that you're solving. But you mentioned this duopoly without mentioning why they're a duopoly. You mentioned gathering this data without talking specifically, okay, why is case law useful?
In a minute, right?
Yeah, no, but even in a minute, right? A lot of this is going to be a drive-by. It's not going to be your best explanation ever. But I'd spend more of that minute in world building, right? So it might be saying there's a duopoly that because they have all the employees in the world reviewing and tagging this case law, there are only two. And again, I don't even know about this duopoly, so I'd want to learn. But there's a little bit there because otherwise I don't know about how big the problem is, right? I'm like, okay, there's duopoly. Is that a problem? But if you say the duopoly exists for these reasons and we're going to cannibalize, or we're going to eat them alive, that's a little bit different. So I want a little bit more of the before world so that I'm a little bit more with you in how different the after can be.
I want to challenge you on this because I'm not sure, especially given the minute, right? I think what I would love to hear is just size of the market, and that you are able to attack the market, and you are able to, that you are focusing on taking out these leaders. It's really hard to explain the depth of the problem. What is interesting for me is what's again the end game, right? And I'll probably keep repeating it in every pitch today. So 3 founders that are still waiting can still adapt. But basically, search engine, and then what, right? So one big problem with search engine is that okay, there are very successful search engines like Google, obviously, right? But one thing that I'm always looking for, where is the lock-in, for example, right? So how do you get customers to stay with you, retention? How do you, what, can you share that?
Yeah, great question. So when you do research as a lawyer, you spend about 2 weeks collecting cases, and you get deeper and deeper until you've seen everything. And this means that you're actually accumulating a lot of data. It quickly becomes like your Notion repository maybe, and you do revisit those past research projects many times across the next couple of years because a case goes on for many years. So we are going to start, or we are starting as a search engine.
So it's
we
also
already
a
are a bit like Notion.
Okay, that's actually good, right? So you become kind of a data repository for lawyers.
And a workflow tool.
Yeah, workflow tool. Do you envision at all any reason for them to kind of write there, not just collect data they find, but actually kind of draft their cases or something there? Or how does...
Most of the time they spend in researching. So drafting is a much smaller portion.
Okay.
And you can only do drafting once you have all the cases and all the research work from before. I actually started the company because as a former programmer, I knew how much AI tools help with programming. And so I wanted to bring the same to my lawyer friends, help them draft. But then I realized if we want to do drafting, we have to do research first, and then we can ultimately combine both into one workflow where the drafting benefits from knowing what research they were doing, and the research benefits the same way from knowing what the draft is about.
Okay, let's dig deeper a little bit into your differentiation, right? So I've heard of this product called Westlaw from Reuters, right? So, and they're obviously, that's probably one of the duopoly, right? So how exactly you are better?
So if you do a search on Westlaw, and let's say you're trying to find a case about copyright, am I allowed to take this video clip that we record today and change the subtitles and make a music video on top of it? If you want to answer those questions, you end up doing a search and looking at maybe 100 different cases to figure out what is the real answer, because the judges have made different decisions in slightly different scenarios. And lawyers need to understand everything in that field. Now, but you do often have to really find the needle in the haystack. And for this, they need tools in which they can understand which cases are worth reading and why, and which parts of the case are most important. And, if a case seems interesting, maybe some bullet points as to, why they might also not be usable, because here the case is invalid because some other condition doesn't apply, something like that. So just a lot of digging and reading and filtering. And on midpage, you can basically just add this as a prompt, and it does all of that for you. So you define those questions, and then it does that across 1,000 cases at once.
So questions, maybe, to me it seems pretty obvious that a company like Westlaw just puts LLM on top of the database they have, and it takes them, I don't know, half a year from now, or maybe 6 weeks, and then they launch a prompt over the whole database.
Yeah, I fully agree, and they already started doing that. Think of it more as Figma versus Adobe. Why was Adobe so impossible to replace and nobody thought it could ever be done? And why did Figma still manage to do it in the end? Right? It's because Adobe was a huge suite with 100 different products or tools, but they weren't great at building software. It became more and more clogged over time. And Figma started with this sort of mobile first or web first wave, and they built a product that was much better at one thing. And it became, just the right approach, and they executed well, and then for us it's a kind of similar story.
Faster execution than the incumbent, right? So basically that's.
Well, we are starting maybe with a blank slate, which does if you look at our platform, it feels much simpler and easier and faster.
Okay.
And there's a gap between what we can do and what Lexis can do, because we have these sort of AI features ready, and I think that gap is going to increase, because if you have a legal publishing house, that is a very different type of organization than a product first tech startup. And yeah, I think we can out execute them. Let's wait and see.
A couple things. One, Figma didn't just build a better product. Adobe, I think, is quite good at building software. So I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm going to say avoid traps like that, because it doesn't really matter which of us is right about is Adobe good at building software. But because you said that, I kind of want to fight with you on it. I won't, because we're on the stage, so I don't actually want to fight you. But think about a normal investor might just get distracted in their brain with I don't think Adobe. Yeah. The same thing when people say open source is one. I'm like, I don't think so. Why are we fighting about that though? So just watch out for those traps. Now, the Figma example is interesting. It won because what was the technology that enabled
sharing and collaborating?
So the fidelity of Figma's multiplayer collaboration, multiple people being on a canvas, so the canvas is the thing that it enabled, is something that I'm going to look it up while I talk, or I'll do it after, while we're talking. Anyway, that's why Figma was possible, because up until that point you couldn't get the fidelity of a software like Photoshop inside a web-loaded interface. So they built something at that point in time, and Adobe never really decided to compete until Adobe Express, and even that isn't multiplayer on a canvas. So I slightly also disagree, but I like the example, and I think you can still use it, which is Figma's building, the technology enabled a multiplayer version of a thing. And I don't know if your thing needs to be multiplayer. That could be one value prop. The other value props is where AI first, here's how the user experience is different from jump. Then you have to be really good at describing to an investor how different it is. So, it's prompt first, or the way if you go to Westlaw, here's what it looks like, but when you come to us, because that's the Figma difference, is I can share with you, or I'm on the web and I've got a big canvas and I can load this on any computer I have, regardless if Photoshop's installed or not. I can open up Figma. That's the difference. So you can still use that that example. I still like it, but be careful not to say it's because they out-executed. They spent 3 years as a beta product before releasing at all.
I think important thing is you need to find a different pain point. The Figma won kind of against Adobe because they found a pain point that Adobe just did not address,
right,
which is collaboration between web designers, right? So, and Adobe just didn't address this pain point. Like similarly, like Google Docs, like, you know, Microsoft Word.
Figma took advantage of a technical transformation, and you're doing the same thing. And so I think that's why it still works.
One thing that it doesn't work, that it feels to me, you're addressing exactly the same pain point.
Well, so let's get into that for a second. There's a couple things that I'm still curious about. So you mentioned collecting case data. Is that hard?
It is something that is not, like, people do it in Word documents today. They literally, over 2 weeks, they will copy snippets of parts of cases that they like.
I guess I'm talking about from the database. Yeah, for you.
Oh, I mean, so building the data set is really hard, yeah. Like nobody is, because Lexis and Westlaw have 2,000 human employees that do lots of labeling and collecting and marking of the data. So what's the
part of that that's hard for you? So let's say
the part that is hard is replacing the work of 2,000 humans with software.
But what do the humans do, I guess? Is this all easily accessible public information? Is it about the tagging? Is it about what is it about?
It is, so there are 500 different websites from 4,000 different courts, and you have to collect cases from each of those. You know, the numbers and the volume is just immense.
But that's the first part. Today?
That is not trivial, but if you put in the hard work, you can do it
with AI.
Yeah, well, that's without AI. That's with scraping. But
human-in-the-loop AI makes it cheap or easier.
It makes it easier because you can use AI-assisted scraper generation, kind of thing. And that's why we can do it now. We couldn't have done it 5 years ago. And the second part is you have to link all the cases to each other, so that if you look at a case, you have to know, did any later judge overrule this case with some other decision? Yeah. And that was the part that was impossible before AI. And therefore, there's now like this window where you can...
So it's kind of tagging with AI, right? So like finding connections.
Exactly, yeah.
I think that it's still very important to see which pain point for your customers will not be addressed if they just implement LLM on top of what they have, right? And this is the thing,
What's the answer to that?
Because to me, it seems like it's so obvious to them to just use ChatGPT and just, okay, now our customers can query using prompts and not just, direct search.
I think it has to do, though, with this relationship thing, right? Between cases.
Wait.
Yeah. Lexis and Westlaw, they have done that for decades. They've done it with humans.
Yeah.
So they do
that. Yeah. The part that is different is when you actually do research, we help you, sift through and filter across thousands of cases, where in Lexis you have to open every single one. Now, they're definitely going to add more AI features. They already have some that maybe go in a different direction than what we would have done. But everything that works really well, they'll just try and copy. I think, like, for us, it's clear that we want to really bring research and drafting together into the same workflow. And that's something that is not so obvious. And that requires your whole product to feel more like Notion, where you can comment on every case.
Yeah,
so there's just a lot of changes to the workflow.
This goes to the Figma point of user experience.
Yeah, so I think this is so much better. Yeah. Because to me, if Westlaw already has a search bar, just implementing like proper prompting element to the search bar is not changing user experience. So they will do that. Right?
Well, I'll bring this all to a core wrap of feedback. I think this is really far more interesting than your pitch reveals. So what we've done is we've pulled out of you what's interesting, and in some cases this Figma interaction of like, oh, this is going to feel so different. In my case, it's like, I do want to know about this prior world, and I think that's going to be very compelling for people who go like, this is just a modernization moment for this industry. And so bring out what's interesting rather than, I think in your initial pitch, what you were doing is you were very straightforwardly talking about the workflow optimization as a series of results versus what feels different. And I think that actually winds up being pretty key here, because the way it feels will also imply different ways in which people can work. The ability to collaborate, or the ability to, again, to see it in a different way. I liken this again to Figma. Figma is not a perfect tool in a variety of ways, is in a weird spot today in 2025 and might be in its losing moment. But the way it won over the past 5 years is by enabling a different feeling of design work that was engineering collaborative inside the tool. You didn't need to use Sketch, or was collaborative between designers in a way where I didn't need to pass you a file. And so these sorts of experiences were some of the most innovative Figma. In fact, it still lacks a lot of the features. Like, it can't work with vector files well today. It can't do...
Let's not go there.
Yeah, but the point is, like, I think that's what's different. So go for those fundamentals, right? That's going to be...
Yeah.
Really
Yeah, we don't have much time, but yeah, also it's important to like mention that, you said you're a programmer with lawyer friends, right? So one thing that is important for your startup, again, is connection to the market, right? So do you have a lawyer co-founder, for example?
Yeah, we have a lawyer head of product. He was, associate at one of the biggest firms in New York, and he was sitting in the rooms where they were making the product purchasing decisions because he had a bit of a software background in his past. And yeah, so he's building the products that he always wanted to use.
Okay.
Overall, it's super compelling. And again, I think pack a lot of this. I know it's a minute, but you'll never have only a minute in the future. It's an initial meeting with an investor. Maybe you do get stuck in an elevator with an investor. But think about the most interesting things first, rather than all of the workflow explanation, then get into the workflow explanation. Good job. For the folks at home watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we are on a mission at the Feedback Loop to help startup founders reach the height of their ambition. So if you aren't already subscribed, if you haven't liked it, shared it with a friend, or left a comment below, please do. We want more founders to see, listen to the show, to get up on the stage and receive feedback, and for the startup community to know that we're building the future here at the Feedback Loop. So again, subscribe, like, comment, hit the notify button if you're on YouTube. And again, feedback is a gift, so let us know what you think about the show or of the startup pitches that you heard today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.